For the next 30 days, I'm going to be working out just like Thor. Or, more specifically, the guy that plays Thor, Chris Hemsworth. After the release of Marvel Rivals, I put a considerable amount of time into the game, mostly playing a lot of Thor, obviously. So let's see what it takes to play him in real life. There's a few different places that advertise themselves as having the workouts that Chris Hemsworth did, but some were just inspired by the type of training he said he did, and what they know from his trainer, Luke Zocchi. I don't know how to say his last name. Either way, there are two websites that are basically identical, so I went with those. Now there's two main components that are missing from these workouts. One is the rest time between sets, which I'm going to assume is about 1.5 minutes. The other is if there's a warm-up, or if the first set counts as a warm-up. I'll probably just do a warm-up set prior, just to be safe. Starting the challenge, I weigh 195.6 pounds, and my starting physique looks like this. I'm a little nervous starting this challenge, mostly because it isn't something I created, and no. When I create workouts for myself, I have a good idea of how long it's going to take, how intense it's going to be, to make sure I'm not going to be killing myself at the end of the workout or that I take too long doing them. With my workouts usually having 5 to 6 exercises and 2 to 4 sets per. Now most days it seems to have about 6, with some going even higher, but almost every exercise throughout these workouts has 4 sets, with most of these sets having 12 reps or more, and very few dipping below 10. Guess we'll just have to see how it goes. Week 1 was pretty difficult. The amount of sets, reps, and just pure volume I was doing every day was way more than I originally thought. Day 1 in this plan is back. The first thing to do is 20 pull-ups. And I feel like I'm a pretty strong guy, but not strong enough to do 20 pull-ups in a row. I think I only got 15 on the first set, rested for a couple seconds, and then finished out the last 5. Luckily, each set had less reps in it, but I was basically pushing failure each set. Day 2 was chest, and that theme of pushing to failure was very present this day as well. It started with 8 sets of bench press. On the website it was showing 9, but I just did 8, considering 8 was already pretty overkill and 9 is unnecessary at that point. And then one thing about the bench press is that since the reps, like the pull-ups, decreased with each set, I thought I could increase the weight each time to keep that challenge there. Oh, but I was wrong about that. After just increasing it one time, I knew I had to either keep it there or drop it on later sets. Later on chest day, I had to do dips, which would normally be no problem, but with my chest already being fried, they felt nearly impossible to do. Day 3 was the unfortunate leg day, with the plan being to do 7 sets of squats. After the second set, I was starting to feel sick, so I took it a little bit easy for the rest of that day. Granted, that workout was already still pretty hard, but I definitely could have pushed it a little bit more. Day 4 was shoulders, and honestly that day felt pretty easy, but still decently high on volume. Then finishing up the week with arms, and same thing as shoulders, it was not too bad, pretty easy, a little high on volume, but it didn't feel like it was killing me. At that point I kind of felt like I was getting used to this style of the workout. One new thing for me is that this is the first time I'm doing a bro split. A bro split typically covers just one muscle group each day, kind of similar how mine is structured. You got back, chest, legs, shoulders, and arms. And just as a side note, it has me doing push-ups on a back day, which I'm trying to figure out how to justify, but I don't really think you can. But we can just ignore that for now. The kind of splits I'm used to doing is a push-pull legs, upper lower, and full body days. This is what I also recommend most people do, mainly because you want to maximize muscle growth. Studies show that training muscle groups twice a week is the best for muscle hypertrophy over once a week, even when the volume is equated. Now these splits are somewhat self-explanatory, but let's break down what each one means exactly. So for a push-pull leg split, you have a day of push movements, which is your chest, shoulders, and triceps, a day of pulling movements, which is your back and biceps, and then a day of legs, which is self-explanatory. Then you repeat before having a rest. The one thing to note is that doing a push-pull leg split requires you to go to the gym 6 days a week. Going only 3 times goes against the evidence we just showed before. An upper-lower split has upper body days, where you do stuff above the waist, then lower days, which is basically just leg day. This one's a little more flexible, allowing you to go 4 or 6 times a week, and probably what I recommend most people to do. It kind of lets them organize their workouts in a way that makes sense to them, and they're coming to the gym a decent amount. Full body is basically working on every muscle in your body every day you show up to the gym, more or less. Now you kind of make a full body day whatever you want it to be. The main difficulty with full body is figuring out what exercises to pick for which days to make sure you're not overloading or underloading certain muscle groups. What this basically means is that you can do chest and legs on the same day, but maybe you leave it on the next day and do something else. Or maybe you do light work of chest and do a little more back and biceps and shoulders, and you do light work for your legs as well, or do a different part of your legs. Full body, the more days you go, can get very complex. But if you do 2 days, it can be pretty simple because you could probably just copy paste both days back to back, because you should be working out all the major muscle groups twice per week. So only going twice makes it pretty easy that way. Honestly, between all these, do whatever's easiest for you. There's no need to complicate things if you're new and just trying to get into it. Just take something you find online and do that. Whether that be like a bro split, a full body, upper lower, or just some random collection of exercises that looks good to you. The optimizing can come later. Well, see you in week 2. Week 2 has somehow felt more difficult and easier at the same time. I was getting a little more used to the flow and intensity of the whole thing, but I was trying to push myself and increase the weight to make it harder for me. Also, leg day was extra brutal this time around. Since I was feeling fine and not sick this time, I was really able to push it. Now, I mentioned the 7 sets of squats last time, but I didn't mention that the next exercise was the leg press with some special instructions. It would start with 6 plates on each side, go to failure, take 1 plate off on each side, go to failure again, and then you just keep that cycle going. And I didn't have a spotter with me, and I wasn't really feeling suicidal that day, so I didn't push it to failure necessarily, but I tried to get as close as I can and then took a plate off and then kept going from there. And honestly, just these 2 exercises alone can be very brutal for my quads, but there were still lunges and leg extensions I had to do. Then after that, it was a little bit easier with just doing some single leg hamstring curls and calf raises. And this probably goes without saying, but my lower body was feeling it for a couple days after that. My shoulders and arms were again decently easy, and throughout the week, I felt like I wasn't getting stronger, but weaker instead. There was a few reasons I thought of as to why this could be. One is that I'm losing a little bit of weight, and in turn, losing a bit of muscle as well. 2 is that I'm overloading the muscles and burning them out, causing them to get a little weaker. Or the third being that I'm switching from a strength-based workout to more of a hypertrophy muscle building workout, which might have its own adaptations and adjustments that are needed. And now I know last week I talked about training twice a week for maximizing muscle growth, but I don't think the once a week is the reason why I'd be feeling weaker, since I should still be gaining muscle, but just slower. Now when it comes to the types of trainings, the possibilities are really limitless. But I'm just going to focus on talking about 2 kinds right now: strength training and hypertrophy training. They might have some overlap, but definitely have their distinct differences. Strength training typically has high weight, low reps, and lots of sets. Hypertrophy training usually has moderate to low weight, high reps, and moderate to a low amount of sets. And while they're both working with weight, they're training the muscles to develop a little differently. Training to increase strength doesn't necessarily care about how big the muscles are. It's more about how much weight can the muscles move, while hypertrophy training looks to grow the muscles as much as possible, with getting stronger just kind of being an afterthought. This is why a powerlifter, like Anatoly on YouTube, can look like an average guy from the outside but lift an insane amount of weight. Now if you're just starting out, you'll increase strength and muscle size pretty quickly early on. You will have a lot of early muscle gains to take advantage of, as well as your muscles develop a neuromuscular efficiency to lift more weight. And while yes, having bigger muscles will make you stronger, having the biggest muscles doesn't necessarily make you the strongest. And to really break down the difference between the workouts I used to do and this one now is really the volume. Just with the sheer amount of exercises, sets, and reps I'm doing compared to what I used to do is a lot more than my body is typically used to. While the weight is lower than what I'm used to, the amount of sets, reps, and just exercise in general is just so much higher. And while I used to make progress doing high weight, low reps and sets, I now have to adjust and kind of check myself to figure out how I should be progressing each week. Week 3, and the expectation I have now, so the first 3 days are probably going to suck, and the last 2 are going to be pretty easy and pleasant, which doesn't feel right because I feel like I'm pushing it way more in these workouts than I used to before. Even though before, each one of my workouts used to be hard, or at least have some parts here and there that are very difficult for me. But if there's one thing I can't deny from these past few weeks, is that I'm doing more work now than I used to, which makes sense. Becoming a god couldn't be that easy, but it's also probably why I'm losing weight unexpectedly. Last week I assumed that might be one of the reasons why I'm feeling weaker. I then started to check my weight every once in a while to see where I was. And by the end of last week, I was almost down by 3 pounds from the starting weight, with the only real difference being the workouts. This isn't alarming weight loss, but it was noticeable. One thing I'm going to try and do is work to balance this out a little bit, mainly for 2 reasons. One is that I'm still feeling sore after some of my workouts, and eating more might help with recovery. And the second reason is that I want to compare my physique to being about the same weight as when I started, just so weight doesn't play a major factor in whether I look better or not. Week 3 was was also the week I started feeling stronger again. Part of what made me feel anxious in the previous weeks is that I wasn't progressing and I thought I might actually lose muscle. But when you're doing something like this where there's way more volume, the progression just is different. It's a little hard to describe, but I'm used to doing 3 to 5 sets with anywhere between 3 to 12 reps in those sets. So adding more weight on some of those sets wouldn't be too difficult. That all changes when you're doing 7 or 8 sets. Trying to push weight on 3 or 4 sets is a little challenging, but doing it for 7 or 8 sets just feels way more impossible. Like if I try to increase it on a set that lowers the amount of reps, it can feel hard to maintain that knowing I have so many more sets with that weight. This whole thing kind of makes you realize how important progression is in your workouts. It gives you a very easy and clear way to improve and see some growth. There's a lot of different ways you could do this, and most people kind of do it automatically without even really thinking about it. Progression could be adding more weight, adding more reps, adding more sets, adding more exercises, changing the rest times, or some combination of all those. So while I have been using progression in my workouts, I'm kind of limited to just the weight. I can't really mess with the reps, can't really mess with the sets or the rest times or changing the exercises because none of that's really programmed in. The purpose of all this is really to add more load, more challenge, or even just stimulate the muscles a little differently to get them to grow. It helps avoiding plateaus. It also gives you an alternate way of progressing rather than strictly increasing the weight. How I'd usually progress is start with high reps, low to moderate weight, and then over the weeks, I would lower the reps and slowly increase the weight. Or I'll do the inverse, while I have a low to moderate amount of reps with a high to moderate weight, and then lower the weight and increase the reps. Mostly depends on the exercise selection and how I'm trying to balance the volume in my day-to-day and week-to-week. The important takeaway from here though is you should just be adding a little more challenge every day or every week to make sure you're progressing. And if you get stuck, maybe take a break, change things up, do something a little different, and see what happens. All right, I'll see you at the end of week 4. All right, this is the last week. And this whole thing went by really quick, and I have some mixed feelings about how I progressed. Like some muscles feel really good and then I've gotten stronger, while some feel like they haven't really progressed at all. Like my back seemed to make the least amount of progress. Every week during pull-ups, it never seemed like I was getting better or improving at them. Unless you count getting better at holding on, not having to reset after doing so many pull-ups. My chest surprisingly felt really good, and it was extra strong this week around on chest day, which might be a marginal increase, but I was also still losing weight at this time, which made me kind of impressed with how I was able to improve my chest. Mainly since that has historically been the hardest growing muscle group, for me at least. So I'm pretty happy with that. Legs still sucked, but that's not really a shocker there. Leg press was a lot harder this time around. Now that I'm close to the recommended start of using 6 plates. Before that, I was using less plates and just getting close to 20 reps, and it just felt bad and it was taking forever. With more starting weight, I was able to lower the amount of reps I had to do and get a better burn for my quads. Shoulders and arms kind of finishes off this whole thing with nothing really to report there. And it had me feeling a little sad and a little relieved. I was relieved because it was all over. I was also a little sad because I'd be losing 2 easy workout days throughout my week. My final thoughts on this challenge: that definitely takes a lot of effort just to even try to look like Thor. I honestly don't think most people will be able to commit to this type of workout. It's very brutal and requires a lot of energy for all the sets, heavy lifting, and just the sheer amount of exercises you have to do. However, there's a lot that I've learned from this. What the main thing is that I could do more workouts than I originally thought I could. I did my best to keep these workouts within about an hour, and most of the time I was able to do it only maybe going a few minutes over, even with doing all the extra sets and exercises that I wasn't used to doing. Before, I was keeping within an hour with very lax rest times. If I was stricter with myself, I could be getting way more done, and probably maybe some more gains. Another thing is that I learned it's okay to really take some time off if you really need to recover. During the first week on chest day, my shoulder felt like it was overworked and I was worried I was going to injure myself. But since I had a whole week to recover from that chest day to the next, it was fine by then. It didn't even hurt at all. If I were to improve this workout, I'd probably remove an exercise from each day, except for leg day. Actually, I might add 1 or 2 more leg exercises. Then I'd scatter them throughout the week to take advantage of working the muscle groups twice a week. But yeah, other than that, all the exercises are really good. I don't really have any complaints about them, other than they might be a little difficult. No crazy or weird exercises. They're all just good, basic muscle builders, really. Finally, my ending weight was 192.6 pounds, and this is what my ending physique looks like. Wasn't really expecting to lose weight, but I guess it's a nice bonus, and there's definitely a noticeable difference on my physique. Overall, I'm pretty happy with this. If you made it this far in the video, consider liking and subscribing to the channel. Thanks for watching, I'll see you in the next one.